Hello everyone, welcome to GoTarryn TV. I'm Taryn, the traveling trainer with GoTarryn Personal Training here in the greater Atlanta area. About to welcome another great trainer and an awesome colleague and friend here also in Atlanta, Georgia, Ms. Susan Longley. Now before Susan arrives on today's show, I'd like to ask everyone out there, if you please be so kind as to like this video, leave us a comment, and share it with all of your friends and family out there. Now we're going to be having Susan remotely calling in via audio podcast today, and we're going to be talking about something very interesting today. We're going to be comparing the self-determination motivating factors of seniors versus millennials. That's going to be really interesting. Now both Susan and I can talk about this as an authority because, as you know, Susan exclusively works with seniors in her fitness training. And I also do some fitness training with not only millennials, but I teach some of them at Georgia State University, so this is going to be a lot of fun. We're going to talk about some of the self-determination factors between those two genres, those two generations, those two groups, if you will. And this is also really cool because this is going to be self-educating for yours truly, because this actually is my dissertation topic at my PhD doctoral program that I'm going to be working on. So I'm really excited to talk to Susan and get her insight and input and kind of see how these two generations truly do diametrically oppose as we talk about the seniors and the millennials right here on GoTarryn TV. So when we return, we'll have Susan Longley. And remember, with GoTarryn Personal Training, it's your time, it's your investment, it's your life. All right, welcome back, everyone. And as I mentioned, on the line, we have all the way out in Atlanta, Georgia, with me, side by side, we have Susan Longley on the call. Susan, how are you doing out there today?
Hey, Taryn, I'm doing good.
Good.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Always a pleasure to have you. Yes, and we've got you back on here today on the call, and I wanted to talk to you today about an interesting topic. I think a lot of people out there will find this pretty fascinating, and in particular, we're going to be talking about millennials today, and you know, we're going to be talking about how their motivation impacts their long-term fitness making decisions, specifically about personal training. So I guess just to jump right in there, Susan, you know, for the benefit of the people that might be listening for the first time, can you first start and tell a little bit about yourself and what you do and the primary type of clientele that you work with, please?
Okay. So so I'm a personal trainer, and I work exclusively with people over 60 years old. So I don't have a whole lot of experience with millennials, obviously. Although, clearly they're around, and I've had my dealings with them, but I don't train them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, yeah, I'm sorry. That's perfect because I think that's great that we're going to be able to see kind of your point of view, my point of view, and kind of see how they kind of synthetically, kind of, as if you will, kind of grow together organically. By the end of this video blog, we'll probably be able to come up with some conclusions. But if we were to draw a hypothesis out there before we even start, my impression is that the seniors would probably be more mature, more timely, more responsible. But again, I'm making a huge assumption there, and so we'll see what our conclusions are drawn.
Well, I mean, it's just like any generation. It's, it varies widely.
Mm-hmm.
I have some clients that are very responsible, always on time, always come to sessions, take their workout seriously, just obviously a joy to train. And, then I have other people that kind of come and go, and they cancel sessions because of their bridge game. Most of my clients are retired.
Yes.
So they don't have obligations anymore. And a lot of them really appreciate the fact that they don't have obligations anymore, and they don't really like obligations all that much. So they're kind of willing to skate out of that training session. Some of them are kind of willing to skate out of the training session because they've got other things to do.
Yeah, and from that vantage point, you've recognized that with the seniors. So, I guess if we were to start with the seniors, right there on motivation, here's the first question for you, Susan, and then we'll go back and forth. I'll try to answer on behalf of the millennials. Do you find that most seniors that you work with, are they more internally motivated or are they externally motivated? So internally motivated meaning they're going to usually show up on time, they'll pay on time, they're not going to make any excuses, etc. They're going to work through soreness. But your externally motivated clientele would probably be the type that, well, traffic was bad, that's why I'm late, or, oh, my bank's low on funds and it's the government's fault because they're not taking care of me, I'm on a fixed income, etc. So I know that's a hard question to answer probably on statistics, percentage-wise, but what do you, I guess, comes to mind in terms of what you run into more so than the other?
Well, I guess what I'd say is the people that stick with me, I've had clients that I've been training for over 3 years, and those are obviously very internally motivated people, and, they understand what they get from their fitness, and they take responsibility for it, and they don't always like it. They don't like coming to the gym. In fact, some of the reasons they hire me is because they don't like coming to the gym, and it's easier to come if I'm there than if I'm not. They know their routines. They know what to do, but they understand themselves well enough to know that they need that kind of support in order to do what they know they need to do. So I think that's a very, very mature attitude.
Yeah, isn't that interesting about personal training too, that some people admittedly are externally motivated and then maybe that's why they need a personal trainer, but right. I would agree with you that in my experience I've seen more of my clients who stick long term usually be the ones that are internally or intrinsically, like they say, motivated because they know they need to hold themselves accountable, so they will hire someone else to kind of help and guide them on that and kind of complete that accountability. But if we flip the side of the coin to the millennials, I at Georgia State would teach a lot of them, of course, during the semesters. Just to answer my own question right off the bat, if you were to ask me, do I run into more internally motivated or externally motivated students? I hate to say it, and I don't know if this is just because it's the vocal majority that I run into, but I would say that most that I run into are externally motivated because I'm just saying that out of my own experience, pretty much of what I run into. And I don't know if, here's another question back to you on that. Is that the millennials' fault, or would you think that maybe the parents, those parents, need to share some of the responsibility? I don't know. I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
Okay, well, I was going to say that some of my most motivated clients have some serious physical challenges, and they understand that if they don't work out, they're probably not going to be able to move.
Interesting.
So that's not something you're going to find in the younger generation. So, to some extent, they're dealing with very different life issues.
Good point.
And a lot of it's experience, too. I mean, the millennials, I guess every teenager is externally motivated. So when you move it, and as you grow up, I would say that most people would tend to become more internally motivated as they get to know themselves better and they have more life experiences. So when I'm talking about my clients on the end of the spectrum, over 60, they've had a lot more life experience than those millennials have.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think there is some, contributions of experience and maturity that definitely reflect upon those that do move towards that internal drive, so to speak. And from my little bit of research, there's the theory of the self-determination theory by Deci and Ryan. And, they kind of compartmentalize that. And as you said, generally speaking, I would think that most teenagers probably would grow up having still dependents because, they're probably on someone else's driver's license insurance, for example, or auto insurance, rather. They're probably living at home. They're probably having most of their expenses paid for. So you're right. And I'm wondering if there's a correlation there as they drive to be more independent and then go off to college, say, or whatever they're going to do, go on to their career and their ambitions, then that maybe forces them to be internally resourceful or maybe independent. I don't know if that's true. I mean, that would make sense. But, you know, going back to what you were just saying a couple minutes ago, you brought up some good points. You know, the seniors, some of them would have challenges that the millennials may not. And by the way, let me interject this, by the way, if anybody's listening, if anybody specifically wants to know, a millennial in definition terms, that's going to change obviously every year as we progress. But right now, in the year 2019, we're talking about anybody that's 21 through 38 years old. So generally speaking, you could think of them born like around 1980 up to about 1996, and that's the range you're going to find for most of the people that we're talking about. And you know, so there's definitely you know, a big difference there, like you were saying, because the millennials will have different challenges that the seniors might not face, and one of those could be income. Most people could argue that most seniors would be able to afford personal training. Some consider
that's not true. The baby boomer generation has the lowest savings rate of any previous generation.
Oh, that's interesting.
At the stage that they're at, there are more baby boomers that don't have any there are people that don't have any retirement savings at all.
Interesting.
You know, they have Social Security. That's about it. There are a number of baby boomers right out there right now that couldn't afford. They can't. You know, that really can't afford much of anything. They're I guess the generation before the baby boomers was the greatest generation. Is that right?
Something, yeah, either that or the what was the other? Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
they had they came through the Depression, so they had a very high savings rate, and they did a pretty good job of planning and came through their, you know, into their senior years with plenty of money. But the baby boomers haven't done so well.
And it's funny, back then, I'll bet that greatest generation was probably referring to the baby boomers as kind of the lazy, you know, kind of immature, that kind of like what we're doing with the millennials, maybe. And
exactly. I mean, you know, every generation does it to the generation below them. But we're actually talking about, when we talk about seniors and millennials, we're skipping a couple of generations in there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
20 years.
I would consider the seniors past, those are older than the baby boomers, because certainly, you know, for example, most of your senior clients you work with are not, I would assume they're older than baby boomers. Is that correct?
No, some of them are baby boomers.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
There are people that are probably about 74 right now are baby boomers.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So they're partly the greatest generation and partly the baby boomers.
Interesting.
But there's no generation behind the baby boomers that's entered into being senior. It's become, I guess, 65 is what's typically considered. That's retirement age. So, most people are considered seniors when you're 65.
And then when we flip it around too, Susan, you know, your experience with millennials, for example, you've come out, as we've mentioned numerous times, Georgia State University, and have guest spoken. What's your observations, just in general, of you know, this, just the little? I know we're only talking about, you know, just a handful of times and for an hour or an hour and a half here and there. But what were your thoughts in terms of motivation that you saw from some of those folks in your guest speaking?
Well, I did speak. Most of the time I spoke, it was 8 o'clock in the morning, and I understand that they have trouble with
That's true. Yes.
But it seemed like there were a lot of people that slept through the class. Not
Interesting.
A lot. No, but not a lot. But there were, I would say there's somebody in almost every class that at least they had their head down in class. They were they didn't, and again, the topic that I was talking about was seniors, and I guess maybe that's not intrinsically very motivating to them, but there were very few questions. There was very few engagement, and there was always one or two people that, you know, wanted to come talk to me after class, but on the whole, they seemed to be mildly interested, but didn't take the opportunity to learn anything new other than what I gave them. You know, they listened to what I said, but they didn't want to delve it deeper.
Yeah, that's really too bad because you would think they'd take the opportunity there. What a goldmine opportunity! But also, I don't think they realize that that's their goldmine opportunity once they finish college. Is the people we're talking about who right? Who they can help. Who not only that, but make a lot of money off of and make a full-time career helping too. So. That's really interesting. I guess we can also assume that the very few students that did come to you and talk to you after class or were paying attention and taking notes, I would assume those were probably your internally motivated folks, and then vice versa, the people that were sleeping or kind of not paying attention, those were probably our external locus of control people there.
Well, I know that from what I've heard about the millennials is they're kind of like the stressed out generation. They're more negative, and maybe if you've studied this, that they have less this is the first generation that does not expect to make more than their parents did over their lifetime.
Interesting. Wow.
And they kind of don't know what happened, so they're stressed out, they're struggling, they're trying to make sense of some things, and clearly the whole world is a lot more stressful. I think with the 24/7 news cycle, where you never get a break from hearing about the latest mass shooting or whatever. I think I didn't go through that when I was 20.
Very good point. Yeah, and let's not forget about social media. I would guess that probably has an impact.
Right, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then being on top, and then knowing everything. Plus all of the bad things that happen on social media, all of the bullying and the shaming and all of the stuff they have to go through. It's almost like there's no privacy anymore, and everybody's out there for everybody to see. I wouldn't like that. I don't have an Instagram account. I do not share my lunch with everybody every day. Don't want to. Like to have a little alone time, but they don't always seem to be able to do that.
Yeah, interesting. And
because there's so much pressure on them to share and to be out there and to let people know what they're doing, that there isn't there isn't a hole that you can crawl into if you need to.
Mm-hmm. And on top of your cyberbullying and such, we're hearing more and more about the suicide rates too from younger people. Right. So that's definitely prevalent, and
Yeah, I think it's a tough generation to be a part of. I'm glad I'm not there, but I have a lot of empathy for those kids. I think it's a tough world to grow up in.
Yeah, very interesting. The millennials, Susan, let me ask you this, just a direct yes or no answer here on this question, and it's a pretty fully loaded question, but the millennials often get labeled as being entitled. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, there seems to be more, they seem to exhibit more of that than other generations have.
And I'm sure when we're generalizing this, there are, like you said, the few and far between exceptions to the rule of thumb, too. For example, your students that come up to, and ask questions after class.
But, I think overall that entitlement, these are the kids that have, in some cases, the helicopter parents.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I grew up during the 50s, and, during the summer, I left home after breakfast. And I went out and hung out with the kids in the neighborhood until lunch, and I came back and had lunch, and then I went back out and hung out until dark.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And my mother used to blow the car horn when she wanted me to come home, because she didn't know where I was.
Mm-hmm.
And these kids are chauffeured from one camp to one class to one event, to school, to they're being driven around, and they're under adult supervision 24/7.
True.
And so I think that might contribute to a sense of entitlement if they think that that's what they're supposed to have. But then, as you age, you have to learn how to deal with, your peers, and your own life, and you don't have somebody helicoptering over you. And I think it may really backfire that they have to negotiate that. In order to become an adult, they're going to have to figure out who they are and what they want and how they're going to get it for themselves, because everybody has to figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that this generation is going to have a little more trouble with that.
Yeah, I could see that, and it goes back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago. Did the parents bear some responsibility? So it sounds like they might, yeah. And so what do you think would be the, I guess, kind of one of the solutions or answers that we could throw out there to, I guess, changing this or steering the millennials back on course to be a little less entitled? What's the answers, do you think, on that?
Growing up a little bit. I think that that it's hard, but I think that that teachers and employers have to demand from them, and I know that it can be really challenging. There's a wonderful little video out called the Millennial Job Interview.
I've seen that. That's a great video. Absolutely. Yes, definitely.
So I think that just finding a way to demand that they be grown-ups.
Susan, also about that Millennial Job Interview, what's scary is the person that showed me that video, we actually made the comment that we laughed. It's a parody or spoof, but really what's really frightening is that it's not too far-fetched from the truth, though, right? Yeah, you can almost watch that and it's not comedic. It's almost like, yeah, that really is how it is. So that's the scary thing to me.
Right.
Yeah, very true.
And I think that the teachers and the school systems bear some responsibility, because I think there's a lot of evidence that the curriculum has been, quote, dumbing down.
Yes, no question. You're absolutely right.
Kids are not required. I mean, I had hundreds of pages of required reading in high school, and that just is not true anymore.
That's true. You're right. Yeah.
Those kind of requirements are not put on most kids today, so they don't have to develop that attention span. And that ability to handle like a long-term, like a big picture. They don't know what the big picture is, and they don't know kind of how to hang on to themselves and what they're working on while they work through toward a big picture. Everything is instantaneous.
Instant gratification, definitely.
Yeah. And I don't know. It seems like the world is kind of moving more that way. And I know that, it wasn't my experience, but, I'm 70 years old, so I don't know how much longer I'm going to be here, and these millennials are going to be here a lot more, and they're creating the world. So maybe the world in another 50 years will be really, really different.
Oh, it will. I'm sure you're right. Yeah.
I'm kind of glad that I won't be here.
And if we went back in time too, when we were in school, when we were given those pages to read and assigned projects, there was no Wikipedia or online library to go to. We actually had to physically go to a brick and mortar library and get the tangible book out and flip through the hardcover books, and it's very true. It's changed much quickly now. You can Google something and get the answer right away, just like that. You can even, there's websites now that you can get people, you can pay them to do your assignments for you, and
I know that.
Yeah.
Isn't that something?
Yeah. It's amazing. So it's no question. In my opinion, technology is a great thing. Internet and the ability to do what you and I are doing right now. But as we can see, it's not 100% perfect and good. It could be used for some things that, like you said a few minutes ago, maybe dumb us down. And, you could take something as basic as most millennials can type and text, but a lot of them don't write cursive because a lot of them don't know how to. And they just weren't taught it.
It's not taught anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really interesting to see that difference. I think we're noticing that a lot. And, like you were saying earlier, too.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Susan. I'm sorry.
I have to tell you this, is
Yeah.
that when the first printed books came out, like in the, 1600s, 1500s, there were a number of people that said that this would be the death of the intellect of the human mind.
Oh, wow.
Because
that's interesting.
Because all of the ability that we developed over millennia for the ability to memorize things and hold things in our memory.
Wow.
We didn't have any way to write it down. Now that books were being printed, that all of that would go out the window and we would all get totally lazy, and that books were one of the worst things that had ever happened to the human intellect.
Oh my God. I've never thought of it that way.
So here we go again.
Wow. It's kind of like you could almost...
The same thing.
I wonder if that comparison holds with when the first cell phone was invented, and whoever did that said, uh-oh, now nobody's going to be able to remember anybody's phone numbers anymore.
That's right. That's right. So every time the technology takes over, then there's something that we lose. There's something that we gain, and there's something that we lose.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting, and it's like you said, it's fascinating to look at. Like, we just look at the last 15, 20 years of how exponentially we've grown in technology, and my God, like you said, what is it going to be in another, not even 50 years from now, but 10, 20 years from now, like even, it's going to be amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's just incredible. And going back to the motivation factor, so, most of the seniors would, as I'm sure we could agree, have that drive, and like you said, a lot of them just out of necessity to survive. Maybe their doctors told them, get in that gym and get stronger, and how many more years do you want to live? Well, you need to invest and sacrifice. I think that it's fair to say the millennials aren't thinking about, hey, I better go in and sacrifice time right now for later in life. I'm just thinking that most probably wouldn't. Yeah, they're probably thinking about watching Game of Thrones or catching the newest movie that's out. So that's probably right there. We can definitely, it's fair to agree that with motivating factors, if they were to think longer range approach, maybe just a broader spectrum in their thinking process and think about things like that, maybe that might help them with their internal motivation and kind of change that way.
I think it's our job to mention it to them. I don't know. They're going to have to embrace it. But I don't think that parents and teachers and coaches and trainers should let it go. Okay, we need to tell them what it's like when you get older. Yeah,
I think that really helps.
Even if they don't want to listen.
Yeah, and later on in life, they'll look back and they'll acknowledge they probably should have listened, or they probably, they'll say, oh, they were right. That's usually what happens. And with, again, referencing self-determination theory, I like to plug that website. It's simply selfdeterminationtheory.org. That's what I'm using mostly for my references in my studies for myself, and as I'm, getting to know more of this. But there's just an abundance of information out there that's available readily. And, I think most people who study behavior modification or any kind of organizational development, most of us would agree you can't change people, but you can certainly give them the tools to try to help them change. I mean, I think that's probably accurate. And seniors, they're definitely with that unbelievable knowledge and experience. They just know, that's why they're in the gym. They're smart because they know that they're extending their life. If they're hiring you as a personal trainer, they know that what better investment can you have, really, versus that for long-term longevity and health and, being pain-free and balance and everything else that you're helping with them. So the millennial generation hopefully will take a look at that and kind of just sit back and, like you said, think about that. With
there's some people, I have people that have started training with me in their mid-80s.
Oh, that's great.
They don't start feeling bad enough until then.
Interesting.
Well, maybe I need to do something about it. And, and there's definitely, that is good, and there is definitely something that they can get from, starting training at whatever age. But it's a long, and on the other hand, it's a long time to wait, and it makes it harder to get to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely, Susan. There's no other person.
If you wait.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, do it now. Time is the essence. I'm firm believer. Once you start, there you go. I mean, that's great that you started now versus waiting another day. But there's a great book that I know you always reference. I guess you can plug that book for others. I know you know that I'm talking about the certain one that you work with your clients.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It starts with younger.
Younger next
there you go, right. Yeah, and there you go. That's absolutely. They've got some great concepts in there that they can just go on. So maybe that'll be a good present to give to millennials. Anybody who's listening out there, if you want to give a birthday present, holiday present, or anything, get a copy of that book and send the millennial to also that website we referenced as well. Well, speaking of websites, Susan, our time is coming to the end here for our video blog interview, but I want to thank you so much for your time and your help. This was fascinating, and a quick 30 minutes flew by so fast. But before we let you go, can you plug your website and any other projects that you've got going on, please?
Right. Okay, it's Susan at my email is susan@susanlongley.com. My website is susanlongley.com, and the latest initiative that I'm doing is I'm working on incorporating Pilates into my senior training.
I saw that.
And,
yes,
it's
absolutely.
Really going well.
Good.
So really,
good.
really. I bought a portable reformer, and they are loving it.
Perfect.
Getting some really good results from it. So.
Yes, that's wonderful. And I saw that at the Family Life Center.
Good.
Yeah. Good.
So
Perfect.
I'll put something on my website pretty soon about that. So.
Awesome. Very good. Excellent.
Well, thank you, Tarryn. I love talking to you.
Yeah, me too. Likewise, Susan. Thank you so much. And let's knock out another blog together when you're available next time. And we could probably continue this conversation we're having right now. There's a whole gamut of information here.
Right.
So, well, thank you again, Susan.
I'm interested in what you find for your dissertation, too.
Yeah. I'm going to be working on that, and I'll share it with you for sure.
You are.
Yeah, well, thank you, Susan. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and also happy 4th to you.
All right, thank you. You too.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Tarryn.
Bye.